I'm Neil Thompson, lead digital research and innovation at Balfour Beatty, and worked with many of the people that were presenting this evening. And it's not on this slide, but the hashtag, which I should have mentioned before maybe, was the BIM by 3D repo. So it's BIM BY 3D repo. So if anyone's given us real-time feedback on that one, would be good, and I can answer whilst we're sitting on there. Next up is Nick Tune. Nick Tune's from CoBuilder, doing some interesting things with data and more along the lines of the product data and the information flow from, if you think of some of the stuff that David's been talking about, the city level, drilling down to maybe sort of the bottom end. Not that it's not as important, it's just as important as the city level stuff, but the products that we buy and the attributes of those pieces of information. I don't want to ruin the rest of his presentation, but I'm going to hand you over to Nick. Nick Tune, everyone.
Yes. So, typical, I always end up after David, and makes a grand entrance and a grand exit. And what David's brilliant at doing is getting everyone really excited about the whole BIM journey and the future. And I guess that's what he's employed to do, and he does it absolutely brilliantly. And then I come in at the back and say, right, this is all boring stuff, what we've got to do. So I'm going to stay exactly to type and do exactly the same things. Basically saying, if we're going to have smart buildings and smart infrastructure, we've got to get the building blocks of data right, otherwise we can't do any of it, which is what I'm going to speak about. If I can get this to work. No, it's flown through it. Sorry, guys. Right, so clients, we'll go to the end. The main thing I'm going to chat about now is accurate as-built models. Not designed, as-built. What do we hand over? What is it that we produce? And the client wants an accurate information model that is made up of 3D geometry, that's made up of the PDFs, and is made up of data. Not the designed, they want the as-built. And this is what I designed and modelled, and this is what I got. Now, how many times have we done that? And that's the way we're heavily looking. And not only this is what I got, this is the information I received. And that is the case still in 99% of the industry. I'm working with all the contractors here. You all do two things. Give a pile of paper and a CD with quite often declarations of performance or environmental product declarations, safety data sheets, the O&M information. More often than not, a brochure about liquid nails, which is not a lot of use to anybody. Surely, if we're to do smart cities, the future, we have to get away from this and start actually collecting data. Now, I might have a model. This is a model, it's a project we're doing in Skanska. Where's the data? It's empty. And Skanska's clients don't want the designed model, they want the as-built model. Which all leads to handing it over to the FM and the client, and this happening, or not. Because what happens then is the FM comes in and resurveys the whole building. It's an industry, trying to work out what the heck has been built and what's been installed. Well, we want to get away from this. We want to deliver accurate data that can then be used and exploited to do all the fantastic things that David mentioned. I often show this diagram. I saw David had trademark on some of his images. I should have trademark it on this. Point being is you might have a lovely design model, and it might be in Revit, it might be IFC, you might have Kobe, it might have BIM objects in there, and blah, blah, blah. But then the contractor often gets that, and then builds a building, or an infrastructure, or a rail, or a road, and then gets to the end and says, what is it I've built? And does the old back thing of going through the whole supply chain, seeing what have we built? And the industry, the manufacturers, generally, 99.99% of the time, give you PDFs. Well, it would be great if we could just collect the PDFs through the process instead of waiting to the end, but really, we want data. So how do we take the data of the products that are actually being installed from the manufacturers through the process of construction, instead of waiting to the end and then getting a load of paper? And then as we're collecting the data, what data do we want to collect? Well, the contractor will need to get COBie and hand over COBie. The purchasing manager, he wants data on costs. The BREEAM guys, we forget about the environmental side of it. There's a load of environmental data that your sustainability guys are going to want. What about the health and safety guys? They want data. This is data through construction. It's not always about operation and maintenance data. It's data that's important to everybody. So we need to understand what data we want. A project that we're doing with Skanska, as I think I mentioned earlier, is looking at this. So what properties does Skanska want from a PDT, a project data template? Everyone's now starting to think about making project data templates. So we have a project data template, a master one, here's one. Skanska have marked out the blue that they want. They don't want to just be handed a massive amount of information. Data's better than handing PDFs. The next step is to hand over data in, could be Excel. But which properties do you want? And also, what format do you want this property in? This needs to be interoperable data. It's not just about data, it's about interoperable data. They might want COBie, they might want IFC, they might want ArchiCAD, they might want to convert the properties into German or French. So how do we get the data we want, and how do we make it interoperable? Which is the interoperability problem. Classification for a door, there's about 15 ways we can call a door. Then there's many different ways we can call the fire rating of the door. Then it might depend on the individual software. So we need to make sure we can all understand. We get away from PDFs, we get to data, and then this data is bespokeable, and we pick the data we want, and interoperable in the languages and formats we need it in. So here's a diagram everyone will love. The Building Smart Data Dictionary. This is the answer. I'm a Building Smart man. I used to head up Building Smart in the UK, and everyone knows Building Smart for IFC. The more important than IFC is the Building Smart Data Dictionary. I've come to realise it's only just. Because without being able to map names, values, but the names of things, then we can't work together, we can't work collaboratively because we don't know what we're talking about. So we're working with manufacturers about getting all their information, their PDFs in Excels and whatever, making it into structured data templates, but basing with the standards, so using the properties that are in the standards. So say a window, the U value or the air permeability or whatever would be Gates of standard. So we start with that, and then from that we can map that to the name in IFC, or the name in Revit, or the name in COBie. We need to make this data now interoperable. So how do you do the data collection? I'm kind of talking about that, mentioning that. And I can't ask, how are you going to do it? At the moment in time, I understand a lot of people are just literally sitting with a COBie spreadsheet, going through all the PDFs and extracting them and typing them into it from the PDF. That's not the way the industry goes. We need to pick the data from the manufacturers. Now what we're doing at CoBuild, a GoBIM tool, is actually then, as I said, to get all their information, structure it against standards, and then make it interoperable against all the other types of naming, software standards, languages that's available. And then make it bespokeable so I can pick the 4 properties I'm interested in, or 2, or 20, or 5. You saw the blue one Skanska have done. So then now, I can now go to my project, and I can say I'm installing Knauf insulation, as it says there. And in my EIR, Employees Information Requirement, or my Asset Information Requirement, says I need this specific data about this door, the fire rating, or whatever it may be, the U value. I can now find it in Knauf, find the property I want, and you might say I want it, output it in COBie, and I want it in German, and I want those 6 properties. Find it, select the thing, and then attribute that into the repository. And this, for instance, would be, again, you can't really read it, but the master PDT project data template. And so many people I've spoken to in EcoBuild today said, oh yeah, we're doing the CIBSE PDTs. PDTs are fine, but that's not the answer just on its own. Unless I keep going on about this data is interoperable, it's just a name and that's it, and a value. If it's based on the standards and it's mapped to other names and conventions, then perfect. So what we do is we put all the properties in that you want, and then me, the client, so it could be Balfour Beatty, can come in and say, these are the 6 properties I want, and they tick the box, I want it in IFC, or in COBie, or in Revit. And that way now they're getting the data they need in the format that's required. Then they can go to their model select the element in the model that they're interested in, and now attribute that data into the model. This is the important point, because this is where we're delivering the as-built model. So here you see Wienerberger. Wienerberger has been attributed into the wall. And you click on that, and what you see is the ProFirm 100. But the important point here is the properties. So the properties then, you see Kobe, for instance, there's no values against it, but this would be back to the EIR in terms of the data that you've been asked to get. So that could be, as we said, in all many different formats and languages, etc. And where the data's come from, which standard. So it's verified data, it's proper data, it's not something someone's made up in a PTT, it's proper verified data. So now, I can now got this data and I can now export to Kobe as BIM level 2 requirement and export, and within the model I can do the spaces and zones, but actually the product data now, what is it that I actually bought and what is it that I actually installed? So now I can deliver my as-built model. I've got my geometry, I've got my data, either as a PDS, a product data sheet, and attributed into Kobe, and I've got my PDFs. Brilliant. Now I can start to think about David's Phillips' new world of data exploitation. But without doing this, as David said, we've got poor data, useless data, and it's of no benefit. So, just finish by saying, without getting the building blocks right, there is no BIM level 3. So let's get the building blocks right, and then we can start having smart buildings. Thank you.